Tomorrow morning, you might wake up, look in the mirror, and for a split second, struggle to remember your own name. Not because you're sick, not because you're old, not because something traumatic happened, but because, for years, you've been outsourcing your memory to a device in your pocket, and your brain has quietly adapted. This isn't science fiction. It's not a dramatic exaggeration. It's a pattern neuroscientists are increasingly concerned about, something some researchers have begun calling digital dementia. We live in the first era in human history where remembering things is optional. You don't need to memorize phone numbers. You don't need to remember directions. You don't need to recall birthdays, appointments, or even simple facts. You don't need to hold ideas in your head. You screenshot them. You don't need to store knowledge. You store access. Your smartphone remembers for you. And every time it does, your hippocampus does a little less work. The hippocampus is a small, curved structure deep in the brain. It plays a critical role in forming new memories, navigating space, and connecting experiences into a coherent story of who you are. When it weakens, the ability to create lasting memories weakens with it. Think of it like a muscle. If you stop using your legs, they atrophy. If you stop lifting weight, your strength declines. If you stop challenging your memory, the neural circuits that support it begin to shrink. The brain is brutally efficient. It doesn't waste energy maintaining systems that aren't needed. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, works both ways. Strengthen what you use. Eliminate what you don't. Now consider how often you reach for your phone instead of reaching into your own mind. You meet someone new. You don't try to remember their number. You immediately save it. You plan your day. You don't rehearse it mentally. You rely on reminders. You get curious about something. You don't think it through. You search it. Each time, the message to your brain is the same. This function is no longer necessary. And the brain listens. Studies have shown that when people know information will be digitally stored and easily accessible, their brains reduce effort in encoding that information. Instead of remembering the content itself, we remember where to find it. This phenomenon is often referred to as the Google effect. We don't store knowledge anymore. We store pathways. The difference sounds subtle. It isn't. In the past, intelligence meant internal accumulation. You built a mental architecture of facts, patterns, and experiences. Knowledge layered on knowledge. Memory reinforced identity. Now, intelligence increasingly means efficient retrieval. But there's a cost to that shift. Your hippocampus isn't just a storage device. It's part of the machinery that constructs your sense of self. Every memory you encode strengthens neural networks that define who you are, what you value, and how you interpret the world. If memory weakens, identity becomes thinner. There's something else happening too. Something quieter and more dangerous. Constant device use fragments attention. Notifications interrupt encoding. Rapid scrolling trains the brain for novelty, not depth. And without sustained attention, memories don't properly consolidate. Memory formation requires focus. It requires stillness, repetition, emotional engagement. Instead, we live in a state of perpetual cognitive interruption. You open your phone to check one thing. 10 minutes later, you've consumed dozens of microstimuli, headlines, messages, short videos, alerts. Your brain processes them, but doesn't integrate them. Nothing sticks. It feels like information overload. In reality, it's memory under development. And here's the disturbing part. Younger brains may be the most vulnerable. Children and adolescents are in critical periods of hippocampal development. Their neural circuits are still forming. When navigation apps replace spatial reasoning, when search engines replace recall, when constant digital stimulation replaces deep reading, the brain adapts accordingly. It builds for what it practices. If practice means tapping and swiping instead of remembering and reflecting, the architecture changes. Some researchers have observed reduced gray matter density in areas related to memory and attention in individuals with excessive screen use. While causation is complex and still debated, the trend is enough to raise serious concern. We are running a global neurological experiment, and we didn't sign consent forms. And yet, it all feels harmless. After all, technology makes life easier, more efficient, more connected. But evolution didn't design the hippocampus for convenience. It evolved in environments that demanded memory for survival. You had to remember landscapes, faces, dangers, seasonal patterns. Forgetting could mean death. Now forgetting means you check your phone. From a survival perspective, the stakes feel lower. From a neurological perspective, the consequences may be long-term. Because when you consistently outsource cognitive functions, you don't just change behavior, you reshape biology. The question isn't whether smartphones are useful. They clearly are. The real question is this: what happens to a brain that no longer needs to remember? And more importantly, if your memories increasingly live outside your skull, who are you becoming without them? Let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about forgetting phone numbers or birthdays. It's about something far more unsettling. Your brain is being rewired in real time. The hippocampus does not work alone. It's part of a broader memory network that includes the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and multiple cortical regions responsible for integration and long-term storage. When you encode a memory, neurons fire together in patterns. Those patterns strengthen through repetition and emotional relevance. Neurons that fire together wire together. But what happens when they don't fire at all? Every time you decide not to remember something, because your device will, you interrupt the encoding cycle. The hippocampus begins to treat information as temporary, disposable, unworthy of consolidation. And this is where attention becomes critical. Memory is not formed by exposure. It's formed by focus. You can scroll for 3 hours and barely retain anything. Not because you didn't see it, but because your brain never switched into deep encoding mode. That mode requires sustained attention. It requires cognitive friction. Scrolling removes friction. Infinite feeds, autoplay, algorithmic recommendations, they are designed to eliminate pause. But pause is where memory forms. When you reflect, when you mentally rehearse, when you connect new information to old knowledge, that's when neural circuits strengthen. Without pause, experiences remain shallow impressions. There's a reason you can vividly remember a conversation from years ago, but forget what you watched yesterday. Depth, emotion, engagement. Now compare that to how most people consume information today. You wake up and immediately check notifications. Your brain is flooded with fragmented stimuli, messages, headlines, short clips, alerts. Before your hippocampus even fully transitions from sleep mode, it's bombarded. This constant interruption keeps your brain in a reactive state. Reactive brains don't encode deeply. They scan. And scanning is not remembering. Over time, this trains a specific cognitive style, surface processing. You become excellent at quick recognition, fast switching, short bursts of focus. But sustained concentration feels harder. Reading long texts feels exhausting. Memorizing even simple sequences feels unnatural. This isn't laziness. It's adaptation. The brain optimizes for the environment it's placed in. And the digital environment rewards speed, not retention. There's another layer to this problem: spatial memory. The hippocampus plays a central role in navigation. It contains specialized neurons called place cells and grid cells that create internal maps of physical space. For thousands of years, humans relied on these systems constantly. Hunters remembered terrain. Travelers memorized routes. Even in cities, people built mental maps. Now we follow blue lines. When GPS navigation replaces active wayfinding, hippocampal activation drops significantly. Studies using brain imaging have shown that when people rely passively on navigation systems, the areas responsible for spatial mapping show reduced engagement. If you never build the map building system weakens. This matters more than it seems. Spatial memory is tightly connected to episodic memory, the memory of experiences. The same neural machinery that maps streets helps map life events. If that system is underused, it may influence broader memory capacity. Then there's emotional tagging. Memories strengthen when they are emotionally charged. But digital consumption often flattens emotional depth. You see dozens of dramatic events in minutes: tragedy, humor, outrage, inspiration, all compressed into seconds. Your emotional system becomes overstimulated, then numbed. When everything is intense, nothing is significant. And significance is what tells the hippocampus, store this. Instead, the brain begins filtering aggressively. It learns that most incoming stimuli are transient, disposable, replaceable. You feel informed, but your internal archive remains thin. Another phenomenon researchers discuss is cognitive offloading. This refers to the tendency to rely on external tools to reduce mental effort. Writing things down is not new. Humans have always used external memory aids. The difference now is scale and frequency. Before, external storage complemented memory. Now it replaces it. When you know a device will remind you, you are less likely to rehearse information internally. Rehearsal is what strengthens synaptic connections. Without it, neural traces fade quickly. Think of memory like a path in a forest. Walk it once, it's barely visible. Walk it repeatedly, it becomes clear and strong. Stop walking it, nature reclaims it. Digital life reduces how often we walk those internal paths. There's also the issue of multitasking. People believe they are good at it. In reality, what most call multitasking is rapid task switching. Each switch carries a cognitive cost. Attention fragments. Working memory overloads. Encoding quality drops. And when working memory is constantly saturated by notifications and open tabs, there's little bandwidth left for deep consolidation. You may feel busy, mentally active, overstimulated, but stimulation is not the same as structural growth. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Convenience always has a trade-off. We outsource calculation to calculators. We outsourced physical labor to machines. Now we are outsourcing memory to devices. The first two changed society dramatically, but they didn't reshape identity at its core. Memory is different. Memory is not just a utility. It is continuity. Your sense of self depends on a stable narrative built from remembered experiences. If experiences are shallow, fragmented, and weakly encoded, that narrative becomes less cohesive. You begin to feel scattered, less grounded, less certain. Many people describe a subtle cognitive fog, difficulty recalling details, struggling to focus on long conversations, forgetting what they intended to say mid-sentence. It's easy to blame stress, or aging, or lack of sleep. But what if part of it is structural adaptation? What if the brain is reallocating resources because it perceives memory as less essential? This doesn't mean smartphones are destroying brains overnight. The process is gradual, subtle, cumulative. But that's what makes it powerful. Because you don't notice atrophy while it's happening. You notice when something is gone. And if the hippocampus weakens enough, the consequences extend beyond inconvenience. Long-term memory resilience matters in aging. Stronger neural networks provide cognitive reserve, a buffer against decline. If younger generations build less robust memory networks from the start, what does that mean decades from now? We are normalizing dependence at a neurological level, and dependence rewires architecture. The most dangerous part is not that devices remember for you. It's that they train you not to try. The question is no longer whether digital tools change behavior. The question is whether they are quietly reshaping the structure of the brain itself, and whether we are willing to look at that possibility honestly. Now here's the part nobody wants to admit. This isn't just about memory getting weaker. It's about motivation disappearing. The hippocampus does more than store experiences. It helps simulate the future. When you imagine tomorrow, plan your goals, or mentally rehearse a possibility, the hippocampus activates. Memory and imagination are built from the same circuitry. If memory encoding weakens, future simulation weakens with it. And when your brain struggles to construct vivid internal scenarios, long-term planning feels harder. Goals feel abstract. Delayed rewards feel less compelling. Instead, your mind gravitates toward what is immediate, which is exactly what digital platforms provide. Instant novelty, instant validation, instant distraction. Your dopamine system begins to synchronize with external triggers instead of internal effort. Before, satisfaction often followed mental strain, solving a problem, remembering something complex, learning deeply. Now satisfaction arrives from a vibration in your pocket. The shift is subtle but profound. Over time, the brain learns that cognitive effort is optional. If something is difficult to recall, you don't push through. You search. If something is confusing, you don't sit with it. You scroll. If boredom appears, You eliminate it instantly. But boredom is not the enemy of cognition. Boredom is the gateway to memory consolidation. When your brain is not overloaded with input, it enters what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a state associated with reflection, autobiographical memory, and self-referential processing. This is when experiences integrate, when meaning forms. Digital saturation keeps you out of that state. You fill every microsecond, elevator rides, waiting in line, even walking down the street. The brain never idles long enough to stitch experiences together. Imagine constantly downloading files, but never organizing them. Eventually, retrieval becomes chaotic, and chaos feels like mental fatigue. There's another mechanism at play: stress. Continuous notification exposure keeps the nervous system in a mild state of alertness. Even if the content is trivial, the unpredictability of alerts triggers anticipatory responses. Cortisol levels can rise. Chronic stress is toxic to the hippocampus. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones has been linked to hippocampal shrinkage. This is not dramatic speculation. It's documented biology. Combine reduced encoding, fragmented attention, and low-grade stress, and you have the perfect conditions for gradual memory degradation. But the most dangerous consequence may be cultural, not biological. When memory weakens collectively, depth disappears socially. Conversations become shorter. Arguments become reactive. Historical context fades. People rely on trending narratives rather than internalized understanding. If knowledge lives externally, whoever controls access controls perception. You don't need to erase books if people no longer internalize them. There's a psychological shift that follows cognitive offloading, reduced cognitive confidence. When you stop trusting your own recall, you default to external validation. Instead of thinking through an idea, you check whether it aligns with search results or popular opinion. Internal authority weakens, external authority strengthens, and over time, you begin to experience something subtle but profound: disconnection from your own mind. Have you ever opened your phone to look something up, only to forget what you were looking for? That small blank moment, that microlapse, feels insignificant, but multiplied daily, it becomes a pattern. Short-term working memory overload interferes with transfer into long-term storage. Too many inputs compete. Nothing stabilizes. You become excellent at consuming, less skilled at retaining. Even language begins to change. Fewer long-form sentences, more fragments, short bursts, reaction over reflection. The architecture of thought adapts to the architecture of platforms. This isn't a conspiracy. It's incentive design. Attention is monetized. Memory is not. The longer you stay reactive, the more valuable you are to algorithms. Deep focus pulls you away from the feed. Reflection reduces impulsive engagement. So the digital ecosystem favors stimulation over consolidation, and your brain adapts accordingly. There's a reason reading a long book now feels harder for many people than it did years ago. It's not intelligence declining overnight. It's neural conditioning. Deep reading requires sustained hippocampal cortical interaction. It demands mental imagery, temporal integration, and memory stacking. Scrolling trains the opposite: rapid novelty detection with minimal integration. Your brain becomes efficient at recognizing patterns quickly, but inefficient at building durable internal models. You might know many things briefly, but very few things deeply. Now imagine this trajectory continuing for decades. Children growing up never needing to memorize, never navigating without GPS, never tolerating boredom long enough to construct internal worlds, never rehearsing complex narratives in memory because everything is searchable. The hippocampus develops according to demand. If demand decreases, so does robustness. And here's the paradox: the more you rely on digital tools to extend your cognition, the less resilient your biological cognition may become. That doesn't mean technology is inherently destructive. It means it's powerful enough to shape neurodevelopment. The human brain evolved in environments that required constant internal modeling. Storytelling, oral tradition, memorization, these weren't hobbies. They were survival tools. Now survival requires digital literacy, not memory strength. So evolution's pressures have shifted within a single generation. We adapted to fire over thousands of years. We adapted to agriculture over millennia. We are adapting to smartphones in barely 15 years, and adaptation is never neutral. It always strengthens some circuits and weakens others. So the real issue is not whether you use a smartphone. It's whether you still use your mind when you don't have to. Because if you stop exercising memory entirely, the consequences won't show up tomorrow. They will show up gradually, in subtle hesitations, in reduced depth of thought, in fading recall of your own experiences, in the feeling that your days blur together. And when days blur together, life feels shorter. Memory gives time texture. Without it, experience becomes flat. The frightening possibility isn't that you'll forget your name overnight. It's that you'll slowly forget who you were becoming. And you won't even notice it happening. So are we doomed? Is this the beginning of a slow cognitive collapse? Not necessarily. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain will not defend itself from convenience. It will adapt to it. And adaptation does not care about your long-term potential. It only cares about efficiency in the present environment. Right now, your environment rewards speed over depth, reaction over reflection, access over ownership. If you want your memory back, you have to create friction intentionally, because friction is what builds neural strength. Think about this. The hippocampus grows when it is challenged. London taxi drivers, who must memorize thousands of streets and landmarks, have been shown to develop enlarged posterior hippocampi compared to average individuals. Their brains physically changed in response to navigational demand. Demand builds structure. Remove demand, and structure weakens. This means digital dementia is not a sentence. It's a direction, and directions can be reversed. But reversal requires awareness. The first step is understanding that memory is not passive storage. It is active construction. Every time you struggle to recall something without looking it up, you strengthen pathways. Every time you navigate without GPS, you activate spatial mapping systems. Every time you read deeply without interruption, you force your brain into consolidation mode. These are not nostalgic exercises. They are neurological training. The problem is that effort feels uncomfortable now. When you try to memorize a phone number, it feels slow. When you try to read without checking notifications, your attention itches. When you sit in silence without reaching for stimulation, your mind resists. That resistance is not weakness. It is withdrawal from constant input. Your brain has become accustomed to high-frequency novelty. Reducing it feels unnatural at first. But beyond that discomfort lies cognitive recovery. There's growing evidence that digital habits are reversible. Neuroplasticity works both ways. Just as circuits weaken through disuse, they strengthen through repeated activation. The question is not whether you can rebuild. The question is whether you are willing to tolerate boredom long enough to do it. Start small. Memorize things deliberately. Rehearse conversations mentally. Recall events at the end of the day without checking photos. Navigate familiar routes without assistance. Read for 30 minutes without interruption. These actions sound trivial. They are not. They signal to your hippocampus you are still needed. And the brain responds to demand. There's something powerful about reclaiming internal space. When you remember something on your own, a quote, a direction, a name, there's a subtle surge of confidence. That feeling is not ego. It's cognitive agency. Agency matters. When your memory is externalized, your mind feels dependent. When it is internal, your identity feels anchored. Memory is continuity. It is how yesterday connects to today. It is how lessons accumulate. It is how wisdom forms. If you outsource too much of it, you may still function efficiently, but you risk becoming shallow in ways that are hard to detect. The deeper danger of digital dementia is not forgetting facts. It's losing depth, and depth is what makes life meaningful. Think about your strongest memories. They are not notifications. They are not headlines. They are experiences you were fully present for. Conversations where time slowed. Moments where emotion imprinted details into your mind. Presence encodes. Distraction dissolves. If your attention is constantly divided, your life becomes a sequence of half-formed impressions. Years can pass in that state. And when you look back, there is less to hold on to. That may be the most disturbing implication of all. Because memory does not just preserve information, it preserves existence. You cannot remember every day, but you can live in a way that strengthens the days worth remembering. Technology is not the enemy. Unconscious use is. Smartphones can extend cognition. They can provide access to extraordinary knowledge. They can connect you across continents. But if they replace effort instead of supporting it, they quietly reshape your brain. The difference lies in how you use them. Are they tools, or are they substitutes? There is a future where humans become increasingly integrated with digital systems. External memory may become seamless. Augmented cognition may feel natural, but biological brains will still operate on ancient principles. Use it or lose it. No algorithm overrides that rule. If you want to protect your hippocampus, you must make remembering a habit again. Not because nostalgia demands it, but because biology does. You don't need to throw your phone away. You need to stop surrendering every cognitive task to it. Let yourself struggle to recall. Let yourself sit without stimulation. Let yourself build internal maps again. Because the alternative is subtle erosion, not dramatic collapse, just gradual thinning. And one day, you might notice something strange. Not that you forgot your name, but that your days feel less distinct. Your thoughts feel less layered. Your sense of self feels slightly detached. That is the real cost. Digital dementia does not announce itself loudly. It whispers, in hesitation, in blurred memories, in shortened attention spans, in lives that feel fast but shallow. You still have a choice. Your brain is not fixed. It is responsive. Every day, it asks the same question. What environment am I adapting to? If the answer is constant distraction, it will optimize for distraction. If the answer is depth, reflection, and intentional memory, it will strengthen those instead. The future of your cognition is not decided by technology alone. It is decided by how much of yourself you are willing to keep inside your own mind. And that decision begins the next time you reach for your phone. Pause and try to remember on your own.